So now let's look at the price elasticity of supply. Just like the price elasticity of demand, we have the same thing, elasticity for supply. So like consumers, suppliers are going to have the exact same thing. Price elasticity of supply is the size of the change in the quantity supplied of a good or service when its price changes. So again, let's look at the market for coffee. Here are the price of coffee starting at $2. What happens to the supply when the price rises to $2.50? Just like when we talked about with demand, we're not shifting supply here. We're just having a price change, so there is no shift in supply. Nothing happens to supply. The better question would be what happens to the quantity supplied when the price rises to $2.50? Well, we can see with the price increase from $2 to $2.50, we're going to have a quantity increase as well, right? The price goes up, quantity supplied will increase. Elasticity is going to measure this increase in quantity supplied relative to the increase in price, same as we just did with demand. So elasticity, we're going to use the exact same midpoint method. We have the percent change in Q over the percent change in P. We can calculate that this exact same way, right? So here we'll plug in our numbers. Q2 is 15, right? That's point B, our Q2. And our Q1 is going to be 10, point A. Quantity supplied was 10. Okay? We plug those numbers in, and we get that 5 divided by 12.5, or 0.4. And our change in P, so we move up. So P2 is going to be $2.50, and P1 is $2. So we plug those numbers in, and we get 0.5 divided by 2 at 0.25, or 0.2222, right? So the elasticity there is going to be 0.4 divided by 0.222222, or 0.18, 1.8, sorry, right? So our elasticity of supply is going to be 1.8. So is this elastic or inelastic? Right? If you're having trouble, remember that E is all the way stretched out, and I is straight up and down, vertical. So this is going to be a stretched out one or a vertical one. We have elasticity of 1.8. We're doing the change in Q over the change in P. So if Q is changing more than P, we're going to expect to see this stretched out. And if P is changing more than Q, we're going to expect to see this vertical. We can tell that because if Q is big, this number should be big. And if Q is small, this number should be small. Right? So an elasticity greater than 1 implies that it's elastic. Elasticity less than 1 implies that demand or supply in this case is inelastic. And elasticity equal to 1 means that we're unit elastic. So it's the exact same rules as we just had for the elasticity of demand. We're applying them to the elasticity of supply. It's exactly the same. What are the determinants of the elasticity of supply? Well, we have input availability, flexibility of production, and time. So let's go through a few examples here. Input availability, right? There's all kinds of different ways to make bread. There's all kinds of different inputs you can use. You can use all kinds of different wheats. You can make rye bread. You can make white bread, wheat bread. There's all different kinds of bread. So the elasticity of supply for bread is going to be fairly elastic. There are 0 inputs available for the Mona Lisa, right? Leonardo da Vinci is gone. We can't paint another Mona Lisa. It's not possible. So the elasticity of supply for Mona Lisas is perfectly inelastic, right? It can't happen again. Let's move on to flexibility of production. So let's assume that you have a book factory, right? You make books for a living. That's all you do. You have a factory where you print books. Okay? Is it going to be possible for you to transform that factory to start making Chevy Cruises? Maybe, but not very quickly, right? It's not a very flexible thing for you to do. So for you to switch from supplying only books to supplying cars is going to be very hard, right? Whereas if you were going to supply one form of car and then shift your Chevy Cruze factory into a Corvette factory, that might be a little bit easier. So you might have a little bit more flexibility in that production, but shifting factories around is going to be pretty hard. So goods and commodities that would be more flexible to produce is going to be a little bit easier. So if you think about your book factory, if you want to switch from printing nonfiction books to fiction books, that might be a little bit easier than switching from nonfiction books to switching to cars. Okay. The last determinant of elasticity of supply is time. Just like with elasticity of demand, the longer period of time you have, the more elastic these curves become. It's a lot easier to switch things when you have more time.